My name is María González and I am a PhD student at EC4 INEA. Today I'm going to present one of the chapters of my PhD, which we call The Other Phase of Recovery, a review of the human dimension of Europe's returning large carnivores. So the return of Europe's large carnivores offers an unprecedented opportunity for trophic restoration. However, its success depends not only on ecological conditions, but also on human acceptance, because the interactions between human and wildlife are also increasing. So understanding how social aspects are addressed across Europe is essential to anticipate challenges and guide restoration strategies. With that in mind, our objective was to systematically collect empirical studies addressing the human dimension of large carnivores in a restoration context in the last 25 years. So for that, we were interested in taking as case studies articles in which they have performed or conducted primary work. That means questionnaires or interviews or Q-method about attitudes or tolerance or perceived benefits of large carnivores in restoration contexts. And I will, explain. We were interested in knowing what was the general trend of these attitudes or tolerance among different stakeholders, for example, farmers or hunters or rural people. And of course, the other main characters of our case studies were the large carnivores in Europe. So these questionnaires or interviews had to be about any of these 5 large carnivore species in Europe, that is wolf, brown bear, wolverine, and the 2 lynx species, Eurasian and Iberian lynx. In addition, we were interested to know how was the ecological restoration context addressed in these social studies. So it has to be a recovery context of the large carnivore population toward an original ecosystem or toward an alternative ecosystem in which we could, or there could be any type of coexistence between large carnivores and local people. So we organized these case studies in a gradient of restoration approaches with different species and complexity, thinking about ecosystem structure. Our selection process was something like this. We look in the main database for scientific papers, that is Scopus, Web of Science, etc. And we started yielding more than 5,000 records. And after a process of title, after screening, full reading, etc., we yielded 260 case studies. What are our general conclusions about the general trends of this type of studies in Europe? So let's take, for example, wolf and brown bear. Here in this map, we located the case study with these dots. And we were especially interested to know how was the restoration context around this case study. So here in the map, you can see the light color. It means the distribution that the species is supposed to have had in the 18th, 19th century. Then the darker line is the population range at its minimum, that is in the 1960s, 1970s. And then the darker color for both maps is the current distributions. So our conclusion with this part of with these results was that wolves are the most studied species, followed by brown bears. And species are especially located in Northern Europe and Scandinavian countries and Central Europe, despite many areas in Southern Europe, where the species has been present, let's say, permanently, which have not been studied yet. Also, our analysis reveals that research on human dimension of carnivores has increased over time. However, there are few studies adopting longitudinal approaches, and with that we mean that they have conducted a questionnaire or an interview, and then they have about attitudes, let's say, for example, about the wolf, and they have come back after some years to see how this attitude have evolved during this period of time. However, we found that this was not very frequent. In addition, also few studies adopt cross-border approaches, despite many populations in Europe spanning multiple countries. Among our case studies, passive restoration intervention predominated, especially conservation policy, which included that means that in the case study they mentioned that the species was legally protected, or they have in the country they have performed any kind of management to persecute illegal killing, for example. But it was also quite often that they mentioned that the species has recolonized the area naturally. On the other hand, active interventions were very scarce and only focused on brown bear and lynx species. But it was not for the other species, for wolverine or for wolves. And just a few ideas to take home. I would like to say that human dimension research is a species bias, as we have seen, especially toward wolves. Also, that longitudinal and cross-border approaches remain scarce, and that is a limitation for future management, because attitudes is not something fixed, it's something that evolved in the time, and it's interesting to know how the perception of the people change toward the species when the density of wolves, for example, increases or decreases. And also that's important, to collaborate between countries, especially if they are sharing the same carnivore population. In addition, studies predominantly address passive restoration contexts with limited attention to active restoration. And just as a final general conclusion, I would like to emphasize that social acceptance is critical determinant of successful ecological restoration in the long term. Thank you very much for your attention.